I'll bet you'd like to know what I believe is the most exciting and profoundly effective antioxidant. Hi, this is Dr. Mercola, helping you take control of your health. And today, I am joined by Tyler W. LeBaron. W is important because there's a number of Tyler LeBarons out there, and he is a literally world-class expert in molecular hydrogen. And he did his initial training out in Nagoya University, did his internship out there, and spent a lot, obviously in Japan, where most of all this research was done. And the reason why you probably haven't heard of it is because it's relatively new. Most of the landmark papers only came out 10 years ago. So and most of the science is in Japan, as I stated. So it's relatively new, but you are going to be fascinated with the information that Tyler has to share today. So welcome and thank you for joining us today, Tyler.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to share the research in molecular hydrogen.
Yes, and now what I neglected to mention is that also you are, what is your, associated with the Molecular Hydrogen Foundation.
And Institute, yeah.
Institute.
So we're a science-based nonprofit. Mm-hmm. We don't sell or represent any products, but our mission, our focus is to advance the research and the education and the awareness of hydrogen as a therapeutic medical gas. Mm-hmm. That's what we need, that's what we're interested in, that's what we do at our organization.
And what is your position there?
So I'm the executive director.
Okay,
I'm also director of several other nonprofit organizations, such as the International Hydrogen Standards Association, where we're working to actually create the standards for the ISO criteria for measurement of hydrogen gas. It's even in all of the scientific research for marine biology or other areas for measuring hydrogen, there's actually no official standard. So we're looking to make the actual standards as well as those for hydrogen products so that consumers can know, well, what could be considered a therapeutic type product or not. I'm also director for the International Molecular Hydrogen Association, mm-hmm. and I'm also involved with the International Society of Medical Hydrogen Research and Biology.
All right, so you're at the leading forefront of all these organizations. But let's get into the depths now and explain what hydrogen is. Well, before we start that, it might be explained what it's not, because there's a lot of confusion about hydrogen with respect to it being hydrogen ions or pH.
Oh, sure.
So let's clear up that first, and then we'll expand on the hydrogen and go on what its benefits are.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, when we talk about molecular hydrogen, it's just diatomic hydrogen, H2 gas. It has nothing to do with...
two hydrogen atoms.
Correct.
Combined, which
combined
is the
together.
Smallest molecule in the universe.
Smaller than oxygen.
Yes, by load.
Yeah. So that's why it's so bioavailability. It's very small, it's neutral, so it's not an ion. It has nothing to do with pH, for example. It will not change the pH of water or the pH of your body, so it has nothing to do with the claimed alkaline concept, if you will. So it's just hydrogen gas. Mm-hmm. It's 3 times more energy dense than gasoline, so that's why it's being looked at as an alternative energy source or fuel. It's what powers the sun and fusion and producing helium. Mm-hmm. This is the hydrogen we're talking about, and we're seeing it can also be therapeutic, effective, whether you inhale it, dissolve it in water and drink it, or other methods of its application.
Okay, so how did you first become aware of this and start your journey on becoming a world-class expert in this area?
Well, with the hydrogen gas, it was in 2009, and I came across an article published in Nature Medicine. Mm-hmm. And this was significant because Nature Medicine is one of the more reputable or prestigious mm-hmm. scientific journals. And this article showed that hydrogen was effective at preventing the brain damage from ischemia perfusion induced by middle cerebral arterial occlusion in an animal model. So basically they just cut the blood supply to the brain, and mm-hmm. that caused brain damage. But inhalation of only 2% hydrogen gas, which is below the flammability level, was effective at suppressing the brain damage and had great effects in the model. And so when I came across this article, I thought, this is really interesting. And it was, and I wasn't, this is a long time ago, and I wasn't an expert, and I'm not an expert by any means. It's so much more to learn. But I didn't have a strong understanding of biochemistry, but there was something that hit me when I read that article that I needed to look into this. Mm-hmm. This is kind of my future. This is what I needed to do. And I took it from there. And was able to read all the research, all the literature, and continue advancing in this area. And then later, as you mentioned, go to Japan, and now I'm able to work with and collaborate with some of the top researchers around the world in this. So I feel very fortunate to be involved in this emerging area of hydrogen gas.
Yeah, and what's sparked your interest in that? Because did you have a degree in chemistry at the time?
Yeah, well, I was actually getting my degree in biochemistry at the time, but I've always been interested in health, in wellness, and exercise performance. All of these things, my whole life, I've always loved that. And then I came across this, something that's safe, something that's natural, something that's easy to use, and could be rather scientific. So it fit every category that I've been interested in since a very young age. I mean, we're talking elementary school when I started reading or looking into this kind of stuff just out of curiosity. So it hit on all cylinders. The small molecule is a very big molecule in my life.
Yes, indeed. And you mentioned you're passionate about health and exercise, as I certainly was and am, continue to be. But you're a shining example of applying this information and getting pretty significant benefits. And you're kind of modest. So I'm just going to say right now that you may not look like it. I mean, you look healthy, but you may not be aware of Tyler's capacity as an athlete, and that you've run a 2:30 marathon, which would in years past qualify you for the Olympic trials. But your new goal is to actually run a 2:20, which will qualify for the Olympic trials now, right?
Yeah, well, 2:18, and it's just something. That's a lot of time to cut off. 10 minutes. I mean, I ran a 5:45 average mile pace, and trying to cut off another 30 seconds per mile, it may be quite difficult. Yeah. But it's fun to have goals to shoot for.
Yeah, not only that, because there's a lot of people that run that fast as the marathon, but to balance that out with strength training, which I was a long distance endurance athlete for 40 years and regret that mostly because I didn't integrate strength training into it. But you're doing strength training. Yeah, I do. And you can, what have you deadlifted, which is probably one of the premier strength training tests?
Well, I mean, on the straight bar, 420 is my max. A little bit more on the hex bar.
Hex bars are a little bit. They're easier. I prefer the hex bar.
Yeah, for me, they're a little easier because I have really long legs and a short torso, so I can get under there a little bit better. But in competition, you have to use a straight bar, so I try to focus more on the straight bar.
Sorry for a little tangent, but Tyler is an athletic stud, and and part of his reason for pursuing this area was his interest in athletics. So, before we go into the application athletics, because there are profound applications.
I'm excited to talk about that.
I want to go into the mechanism of how it works.
Sure.
Because essentially it lowers oxidative stress, which is really one of the, along with inflammation, and inflammation causes oxidative stress.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
Right?
So they're two of the most fundamental mechanisms for destroying human health.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why this is so exciting, is that this molecular hydrogen is probably the best antioxidant out there for a variety of reasons. And this is not hyperbole. This is, you'll come to the conclusion after we share this information for you that you'll reach a similar conclusion, I think. So why don't we talk about the mechanisms? Because there's some confusion. You would think that the hydrogen gas dissociates, knocks off, or is able to neutralize hydroxyl free radicals, which is probably the premier worst free radical that you could have, and causes the most oxidative damage. But it doesn't appear to work that way. So why don't you get us up to speed as to what the current thinking is in the mechanism? Well,
and I appreciate that you talked about the inflammation, oxidative stress as an underlying cause to virtually every disease, because, and I'm going to get to your question, but this is an important thing to consider, because it is almost a skeptical sign, if you will, when we look at a molecule like hydrogen that has such a wide, diverse effects in so many different diseases. So far, I mean, the research is still in its infancy. We don't have decades of clinical studies for hundreds of
Yeah,
right?
and that landmark paper that you read in 2009 was actually published in
In 2007, yeah.
10 years ago.
Exactly, right. So this is still quite new, but so we have, there's over 1,000 publications on molecular hydrogen, and they're suggesting that hydrogen has a therapeutic potential in over 170 different human and animal diseases. And the reason why it can be so many different diseases, because most drugs, it's like one disease, one organ, one target. Hydrogen, many organs, many targets. In fact, hydrogen has been shown to be effective in essentially every organ of the human body, which we'll talk about. And the reason why is because it really helps to mitigate the area of oxidative stress and inflammation. So, okay, how is it mitigating oxidative stress? And you're right, this hydroxyl radical, it is one of the most cytotoxic radicals. And I think in order to understand how hydrogen works, we need to understand a little bit how free radicals work and why they're produced anyways. And first off, the hydroxyl radical, which is OH neutral with a lone pair electron, it's produced in the body through, say, the Fenton reaction. When you have different free radicals that get too high, like superoxide radicals or high levels of peroxynitrite, that can be converted into hydroxyl radicals, ionizing radiation. These can all be converted to hydroxyl radicals, and they are so damaging because they are so reactive. Wherever they're produced, they immediately react with...
Let me just interject here, too,
Sure.
because most anyone wouldn't dispute the damage of ionizing radiation.
Yeah.
And the commonly held belief is that most of the damage occurs because of the high energy in those bonds and ionizing radiation to actually break the DNA and covalent bonds. But actually, it's the production of the oxidative stress that probably causes more DNA double and single stranded breaks than the actual ionizing radiation themselves.
Yeah, that may be because now you're talking about propagation cascades, right? And now you have really serious problems. And when you look at the other free radicals, nitric oxide, I mean, that's a very important free radical, the vasodilation.
Therapeutic.
Right? We don't want to neutralize that. We have superoxide radicals. We have other oxidants like hydrogen peroxide. These are all very important. Of course, too much is bad, but having them in the right concentrations, the right locations is very good for you. So we don't want to just neutralize all of those. Whereas like hydroxyl radicals, yeah, we don't want any of them. Or peroxynitrite oxidants, we don't want any of that. And that Nature Medicine publication in 2007 specifically showed that hydrogen could act, notice that word, could act as a therapeutic antioxidant by selectively reducing the cytotoxic oxygen radicals, specifically the hydroxyl radical and to a lesser extent peroxynitrite, without decreasing the other oxidants like hydrogen peroxide or superoxide. Okay, so in that sense it is selective. But how does it actually do that? Typically when we think about...
And that's the key word, selective, because you're going to hear it. That is like, if you have a key word here, it's selective. That differentiates it from essentially every other antioxidant.
Exactly. Most other antioxidants, they're not selective. They're just, hey, I have an electron, take it, and now it's going to neutralize that, and that could be problematic. And I think potentially, when we look at some of the clinical trials on antioxidant supplementation in general, we could have, there's a lot of conjecture of, well, maybe that was a synthetic, or this was that, or whatever. But the fact is, these are still antioxidants in the conventional sense. They took high levels of them, and they had to stop the clinical studies because the people taking the antioxidants were dying, getting cancer, lung cancer, or prostate cancer, or cardiovascular disease faster than those on placebo. And you see the same thing with sports athletes, that athletes taking antioxidants, high levels, chronically, it negates the benefits of exercise training, but potentially because the antioxidants are neutralizing these beneficial signaling molecules that our body needs. So hydrogen is selective in that it's only going to decrease or reduce those toxic radicals like the hydroxyl radical, right? Now the mechanism, how does it do it? Is it really that hydrogen gas is directly reacting with the hydroxyl radical, scavenging it, and producing water? It's possible it happens, I suppose. It can happen at least in vitro because the reaction is favorable if you look at calculate Gibbs free energy, for example. But there's a lot of other competition with a lot of other antioxidants, and the rate constants are quite low for hydrogen gas. So probably the direct scavenging does not account for the therapeutic actions of hydrogen. So there's two definitions of an antioxidant I'm going to give you. There's the
and let me just stop you there before you get the definitions. So this is actually, what you just stated is actually sort of contradicts what the earlier beliefs were. Then people early in the field thought that that was the mechanism.
Well, it's interesting. Maybe that may be more what people interpreted that what was the earlier beliefs. But if you look at the paper, hydrogen acts as a therapeutic antioxidant. It doesn't say it is, it says it acts as one, right? And also the definition of an antioxidant, one of them on the conventional chemistry side could be a molecule that donates itself to a radical reaction inducing a termination step, donated an electron, sacrificing itself or giving an electron. Then on the other side, there is simply a molecule that improves the redox status of the cell.
Okay, so explain redox status, because many people won't know what that is.
So redox, as in oxidation, reduction, there's a balance, right? Or not really, it's homeostasis area, but you have to have so much oxidation in the body and so much reduction in the body. There's a balance between the two. And life is balanced, just like a battery. You have a negative and you have a positive. You can't have just a negative electrode or a positive electrode. And the body is the same. The cells are the same. You have to have an oxidation and a reduction. And that's how everything works. Cell communication, everything. And when that balance gets perturbed, either too much oxidation, you have oxidative stress. If you have not enough, you have other serious problems. If you don't have enough oxidative power, for example, in your endoplasmic reticulum, which folds the proteins, you have misfolded proteins, which leads to lots of disease. And aging and diseases is really associated with a dysregulation, a redox dysregulation. It's not so much an excessive amount of free radicals, but a redox dysregulation. That's the real issue with aging and diseases.
That's a profound concept that really most people haven't been exposed to.
Yeah, it's not, oh, free radicals. No, we need free radicals. And studies have shown you can actually suffer from too much oxidative stress and too much reductive stress, or not enough oxidative potential, not only in the same body or the same organ, but in the exact same cell, right? Too much oxidative stress in the cytosol, not enough oxidative power in the endoplasmic reticulum. And hydrogen helps to bring everything back to homeostasis. And so going back to how hydrogen works, what we see in cell studies, in animal studies, in plant studies, in human studies, in all of these studies, hydrogen does indeed exert an antioxidant-like effect. It acts as this antioxidant to improve the redox status of the cell. We see this through markers of MDA, malondialdehyde, OHDG, which is a marker of DNA damage. We see improvements in superoxide dismutase, glutathione levels. I could just go on down the list of what we see in clinical studies and other animal studies showing that indeed hydrogen does improve the redox status of the cell when it is needed. How does it do it? It's not done through this conventional radical scavenging activity. It does it through acting like an antioxidant, and does so by selectively, part of the reason is selectively reducing just the cytotoxic radicals. Again, probably not directly reacting because of the competition with so many other nucleophilic endogenous electron donors, right, in the cell. So how does it do this? Well, maybe it's helping to prevent some of the free radicals from being produced. For example, in one animal study, they took these mice and they chronically restrained them in a container so that it would induce cognitive impairments, Alzheimer's basically. And they did a genetic knockout for vitamin C depletion. So almost all mammals produce vitamin C. Except for humans, right?
Guinea pigs.
Yeah, I think guinea pigs and I think bats are also. But they did a genetic knockout so they could suffer from oxidative stress, and they found that the drinking of hydrogen-rich water was very effective at preventing the development of actually atherosclerosis, but also in the production of superoxide in the hippocampus of the brain. And so when we see other studies with like an allergic type reaction, that hydrogen downregulates a NOx system, NADPH oxidase, which is a complex that produces free radicals, like superoxide radicals, and when they get hyperactivated and chronically stimulated, we have high levels of free radicals and subsequent inflammation that is very damaging to the cell and causes cell death, apoptosis. And so hydrogen is able to downregulate actually go and downregulate this NADPH oxidase system in other ways to actually prevent these excessive free radicals from being produced in the first place. So that's one.
That's a powerful
that's
mechanism.
one way. Yeah, it's a prevention, right? What's better?
It's the best way.
Exactly. So that's one of the ways hydrogen can help mitigate and improve the redox status of the cell and thus act as this antioxidant, right? Another way is you're familiar with the NRF2 pathway, NRF2 pathway, right?
Absolutely.
This is a transcription factor that when it's activated, it goes into the nucleus and binds to the DNA. And when it binds to the ARE, the antioxidant response element, it then induces the transcription of further cytoprotective enzymes. Your glutathione, superoxide dismutase catalase, glutathione peroxidase, phase 2 enzymes, heme 1 oxygenase. So there's many, many cytoprotective enzymes. And hydrogen can somehow also activate the NRF2 pathway. So this is another reason why we're seeing improve. One of the study a few years ago in metabolic syndrome, they found that the subjects drinking hydrogen-rich water had about a 43% increase in extracellular superoxide dismutase. So yes, hydrogen does have this antioxidant-like effect because it can help regulate the NRF2 pathway and bring these levels of these enzymes and these cytoprotective proteins back to the levels they're supposed to be, back into that realm of homeostasis. And we see this through many clinical studies. And so that's another way that hydrogen gas can exert its antioxidant-like effect. It's more this cell modulation type action. But again, as a direct radical scavenger, probably not so much. Sure, maybe it can happen.
So can you relate how effective hydrogen is to stimulate NRF2 pathway relative to some of the other nutrients and phytonutrients that are known, like glucoraphanin or sulforaphane for the
Sure.
And a whole variety of others. I mean, it's a really important pathway, and probably one of the most important ones because it just produces the antioxidants when you need them. It's hermetically controlled, so it's not like a surge of excessive antioxidants.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be nice to be able to quantify.
Yeah, but we don't know.
I don't know that we can do that. And because hydrogen is very mild, because if you take, and you see this, if you look at the studies, and this is why hydrogen is so difficult to study, is because if you administer molecular hydrogen to a cell or an animal, a lot of times you don't see any changes. If everything is already perfect, everything's already in homeostasis, you don't see changes. You may see changes in gene expression and mRNA levels, but other significant changes, especially phenotypically, you don't see. But perhaps if you were to give a drug or other pharmacological agent that's potent, you do see significant changes. You don't see that with hydrogen. For hydrogen, often you have to administer some sort of a toxin or an assault of some sort, and you look to see how hydrogen mitigated or rescued or attenuated those effects from that toxin-induced problem, okay? So if you were to give hydrogen to a cell or a human that's healthy, and you look at the NRF2 activation or the glutathione levels, often you may actually see no change at all.
If the cell's healthy.
If the cell's already healthy. But as soon as you were to induce some sort of a toxin, radiation, or some environmental pesticide type toxin, which we see in some of these studies, that's when you start seeing that, oh look, hydrogen helped prevent the downregulation or the decrease of that glutathione or that superoxide levels, superoxide dismutase level in the cell. And this is important because it's not good to have a constitutively active NRF2 signaling. That's really bad. And that's also part, like I said, you have to have a balance. Redox balance, redox homeostasis. So it's not really a balance, it's redox homeostasis. And if you have a constitutively activated NRF2, there's genetic conditions where you can actually have too much of a reductive components that are being produced, and that can lead to various hypertrophy, myocardial hypertrophy, and other areas. And yeah, that's not good. And various toxins, cancer even, can be problematic in that area. So it is a little concerning. Maybe some of these strong, powerful agents taking chronically over a long period of time, maybe they're not so good to be doing, because maybe some of your cells in, say, your liver maybe they need some extra NRF2 upregulation. But maybe the cells in your brain or something, maybe they don't need that. Well, if you take this other component, just conjecture, but perhaps the other pharmacological strong signaling component would upregulate NRF2 in many of the cells, even those that don't necessarily need it.
Systemically, without differentiation or discrimination.
Exactly. Whereas with hydrogen, it knows.
So I've heard you lecture many times, and there's a brilliant slide that you have in there, and perhaps I'd like you, we can get in post-production, put it integrated into this video, and you can talk about it as if the slide was there.
Okay.
But it's a study where they showed basal levels of oxidative stress, and then they administered, I believe, ionizing radiation.
Sure, yeah, with the
then added hydrogen with and without. It's like one picture is worth 1,000 words, and it was just beautiful.
Well, yeah, it was published in Free Radical Research, and it was just showing a marker of DNA damage, 8-OHDG, and you'll see that yes, there's very basal levels of oxidation, if you will, all the time, and then when you administer the molecular hydrogen to that healthy cell with no radiation, the level stays exactly the same.
So and the meaning being because the basal level of free radicals, which you need to stay healthy, doesn't get lowered.
Right, exactly. And then the ionizing radiation, goes really high up, and then you can see hydrogen significantly attenuates that upregulation of the oxidative stress.
Yeah, I believe it was about 80% reduction. It was over 50%, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at it, but it was significant.
Significant. So what does that mean? It means that there are going to be times in your life when you are going to be exposed to ionizing radiation stress.
Or other toxins, right?
Other toxins, but we'll just go ionizing radiation because we know that's what the study was done with. So you're getting an X-ray, you're getting a CAT scan, you're flying at 35,000 feet, being exposed to gamma rays. So what are the implications for that? According to this study, if you have taken a therapeutic dose, and we'll talk about what that means in a moment, of hydrogen, you can radically lower the damage from ionizing radiation.
Yeah, I mean, we would need a clinical study.
Yeah,
but the implication,
right?
Yeah, it's certainly something worthy of pursuing.
It's what I use all the time.
And well, hydrogen is safe.
Yeah,
hydrogen is safe, and so it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about its safety because and then why it's just from a historical perspective why it might be considered beneficial because we actually make hydrogen gas, or our gut bacteria makes the gas. So
there's two areas that I find interesting. One of that is the fact that we're always exposed to hydrogen, and this does show safety, but it also potentially shows a reason why hydrogen is therapeutic in the first place. It's a romantic story when you consider hydrogen. The number one on the element on the periodic table of elements, right? Number one. First element, the Big Bang, however direction you want to take it, hydrogen is considered the father of all the elements. It's what powers the sun. And then we have life created on Earth, and potentially it started in the deep sea hydrothermal vents, and hydrogen could have been used as a first energy source that started the genesis of life. And now we're seeing with the hydrogen hypothesis with hydrogysomes and mitochondria that hydrogen was actually the key that forged the bond of making eukaryotes or plant animal cells out of bacteria. So hydrogen was involved in the beginning of the universe, the genesis of life, the evolution of life, and now we have developed the symbiotic relationship with bacteria on our skin, our intestines, right? This is a huge thing, is the probiotics. Everything is there, but our intestinal bacteria produce hydrogen gas also. I mean, lots of hydrogen gas, liters a day, up to 10 liters or more a day, depending on
the individual. If you're imperially oriented, like the United States, it would be like 2.5 gallons.
Okay.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. And so, but it's interesting just from an evolutionary perspective, the fact that we've always been exposed to hydrogen gas, perhaps through evolution, we've conserved some of the targets, or we've developed targets, and this is why we're seeing the therapeutic effects of exogenous hydrogen gas administered in the cells. And we know that the hydrogen gas produced through intestinal bacteria is therapeutic. And we've seen, for example, one study from the University of Florida with the Forsyth Institute in Boston. They did a genetic knockout in E. coli, and they found that the administration of a lactulose into animals, rats that had E. coli that could not produce hydrogen gas. They took out the hydrogenase enzyme. Well, they would metabolize the lactulose, the non-digestible fiber, but there were no benefits to the fiber anymore. And they put the bacteria back in that could metabolize lactulose and produce hydrogen gas. This hepatoprotective effects were reinstated, suggesting that at least in this condition, the benefits of the fiber were mediated by the production of hydrogen gas.
Yes. Now, let me frame that, because a lot of people may not understand what you said, and give them my clinical experience with
Please,
it.
yeah.
So lactulose is a non-digestible sugar. You don't have enzymes in your body to break it down. These gut bacteria do. And this is actually considered a drug. It's a prescription drug, and I used it when I was in residency training for people with hepatic encephalopathy, and I believe it's still used. And it works. Now, how could a non-digestible sugar get people out? A hepatic encephalopathy is brain damage or as a result of liver failure. So how does that work? It makes no sense, but it worked, and it was used, and it's still being used. And I never understood. I don't think anyone out there understands how it works until you shared this with me earlier.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. And maybe even these other ones like acarbose and things are suggesting that some of the cardiovascular protective effects are mediated by the increased production of hydrogen gas. But then the question remains, well then if this hydrogen gas is so good for you and you're producing so much of it, why would ingestion of hydrogen-rich water, which is not near as much hydrogen gas as you do from the other method, why would that still be therapeutic?
It's literally orders of magnitude lower, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking, if you consider the saturation, about 18 milliliters of hydrogen gas, 0.8 millimolar, or 1.6 milligrams per liter. It's not very much in comparison, but we still see in the animal and human studies that
plant,
which is very interesting because all eukaryotes has this ubiquitous effect. But we still see it's very effective, and in fact, in one of the studies, actually at Nagoya University, in the Parkinson's disease model, they showed that a continuous administration of hydrogen in the air was not effective at preventing the Parkinson's disease, but an intermittent exposure was effective, but not near as effective as drinking hydrogen-rich water.
Now, that is key. That you just sort of encapsulated the treasure chest of how to understand hydrogen and get it to work. So expand on that point, because cyclical or intermittent exposure as opposed to continuous you've got to understand that.
Again, we need more research to really understand the primary targets and molecular mechanisms of how it works, but it does appear to be more of a gaseous signal modulator. And the way signal modulators work is it needs to have this intermittent type exposure else you get habituation or subsequent attenuation of the signal. And that's what we're seeing with hydrogen gas. And in fact, in that study I mentioned earlier with the polyoprotein E knockout mice, that was vitamin C. So this one, polyoprotein E knockout mice, would develop atherosclerosis. I think I got those two confused. But in this study, they originally tried inhalation of hydrogen gas. And they saw good effects, and then they disappeared. And then they tried drinking hydrogen-rich water. And the effect was significant during the entire study. And it was more effective than other methods. It's a very, very powerful study, published in 2008. But again, it was this idea of this intermittent type of exposure. And I think this helps us to understand how hydrogen gas works, is the pulse type effect, getting the hydrogen into the body, inducing a cell modulation of some sort, and then that's gone, and that's going to alter the gene expression.
Yeah, I think it's related to some universal biological phenomena that really requires this intermittent cycling pulsing effect.
Yeah.
And I absolutely personally confirmed it and believe this is true for diet. So I wrote a book, Fat for Fuel, which talks about helping people get into ketosis because it's so therapeutically beneficial, but you can make the mistake, like I did, to think if it's so good, let's do it continuously. Just like if hydrogen is so good, let's do it continuously. Well, the problem is if you do it continuously, it stops working and you get worse. You actually get worse with ketosis. That's why you have to cycle in extra carbohydrates, a few times a week once you reach that, which probably increases hydrogen gas production. more than likely.
It may. You know, there's so many effects of hydrogen gas, and I guess we didn't quite finish the safety portion.
Yeah, we want to talk about the divers and everything.
Yeah, so the fact that hydrogen gas is produced in the intestines is a great indicator of its safety. We're always exposed to basal levels of hydrogen gas in our blood, in our breath, all the time. So anybody can have it. You know, pregnant, the child, everybody. Hydrogen gas itself is very safe, and they have used it in deep sea diving to prevent decompression sickness since the 1940s. And their human studies on showing the safety of hydrogen gas are very powerful, showing at millions of times higher concentrations. I mean, you know, 10 atmospheres of pressure and higher of hydrogen gas, 98% hydrogen gas, very high levels with no chronic toxic effects. And so it does appear to be very safe. Now, I'm not saying there are zero side effects. We don't know. We can't say that. There may be certain conditions where hydrogen gas could be bad for, but what we've seen so far is hydrogen gas is
Well, one speculation is to take it continuously, because then you essentially aren't able to gain
to get the benefits of
right.
it. Sure.
Well,
okay.
but because you're not getting the benefits, you're almost indirectly causing damage, because normally you would be exposed to cyclical exposure from your gut or from other sources.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
but essentially you're not going to get a side effect from taking this unless you really abuse it, because then you're just not getting the benefits.
Right. Yeah. Well, and we really, that's the thing, we really need to see more clinical studies.
Right.
And some of the clinical studies that have been out, they're quite powerful. I need to tell you, you're going to love this.
Yeah.
Okay?
You just got back from a lot of research.
Yeah, I was just in China. I spoke at one of the Chinese biomedical symposium there, and then previously the one in Japan I attended. But I just remember this study, this quite powerful, a couple studies actually, but I want to talk about. One of them, they compared inhalation of hydrogen gas, about 3% hydrogen gas inhalation, with a cerebral infarction, okay, which can cause a stroke and it's very problematic. And they had 50 patients, 25 in the hydrogen inhalation and then 25 in the control group. In the control group, it wasn't just air they inhaled, they actually compared it to an approved medical drug. And of course, that's a scary thing to consider, because what if you're in the hydrogen group and you don't know if it's going to be therapeutic or not? You'd rather be in the group that's been proven, or not proven, but clinically demonstrated to be good. Well, they were able to do this study because the animal studies and different things were very, very powerful. Well, they did a study and they found that the group on the hydrogen was significantly more effective than the approved drug on all the measured parameters, with no side effects. So this is, again, if you can't tell, it's why I'm so passionate about hydrogen, is because here we have a molecule that is simple, safe, easy to administer, and actually has some really significant therapeutic potential. And there was just another study, just barely published, for mild cognitive impairments, Alzheimer's disease. And if you looked at the genotype, those with ApoE4, which genotype is very susceptible to Alzheimer's disease. In fact, about 50% of all Alzheimer's disease patients are the ApoE4. And when we look at the effects of hydrogen, drinking hydrogen water, it was a one-year study, about 100 patients or so. They found hydrogen was significantly therapeutic at helping in this disease. And that's big, because there are no, at least that I know of, there are no approved drugs that are effective for Alzheimer's disease.
No, but there's approved strategies, and one of them is...
Okay, strategies is different.
I'm
talking about
drugs.
Okay.
No, there's no question. But it's interesting you mentioned the ApoE4, because I've interviewed Dr. Dale Bredesen before, who's really, I view as one of the world's leading experts in Alzheimer's.
Okay.
I mean, he gets it at a very profoundly deep level. And he shared this amazing insights about ApoE4 and related to the fact that almost all humans, all of our ancient ancestors were all ApoE4 double homozygous.
Is that right?
Yes. And it actually benefits health.
Okay.
If you're able to apply what it's designed for, which is that we were never designed to eat. If you're ApoE4 especially, continuously. You've got to do fasting.
That's interesting.
And if you
Okay.
don't fast, you're going to get neurodegenerative changes that progress into Alzheimer's. So it's, again, this whole
Well, then,
cycling benefit.
if that's true, which I don't know, this is new to me, but it's
yeah.
interesting because hydrogen, one of the pathways that hydrogen seems to mimic is that of fasting.
Yeah.
So you look at the, for example, there's an article published in the Journal of Obesity, which was a Nature publishing group also, and they found that hydrogen was able to induce hepatic growth factor, or FGF21, fibroblast growth factor 21. Well, that's huge. This induces energy metabolism, and when they compared in the study, they found that effectively drinking hydrogen-rich water had the same effect as about a 20% caloric restriction. Okay, and then there was an additive effect when there was a caloric restriction and the ingestion of hydrogen-rich water. And we're seeing hydrogen, okay, for example, when we fast, one of the first hormones we start to produce is ghrelin, right? And ghrelin is the hunger hormone, but it can increase growth hormone levels, it's very neuroprotective, has anti-inflammatory effects, it's very good for the body. Hydrogen can induce gastric ghrelin production. And in fact, that was shown to be one of the primary mediators in benefiting Parkinson's disease from drinking hydrogen-rich water. So many of the animal studies, as I mentioned one earlier, but many animal studies, including a double-blinded placebo-controlled clinical trial that was about a year long of 100 patients or so, also showed hydrogen was very effective in Parkinson's disease, and now they're just finishing up a 3-year clinical trial of about a few hundred patients. But what we see, though, is hydrogen is able to benefit this Parkinson's disease, likely via inducing gastric ghrelin production. So we have ghrelin production mediated by fasting, and also FGF21 and the increase in the whole energy metabolism. So it's very interesting. Hydrogen seems to mimic some of these same pathways. So it's interesting that you brought that up. Maybe there's some other correlations to be investigated.
Yeah, so I've got another question for you too. So you've talked about its benefit in neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and also for cerebral vascular access and heart disease. So there's two of the other big diseases out there would be obviously cancer and diabetes. Are you aware of any studies that have looked at hydrogen applications?
Sure, yeah. So if we look at diabetes, and we can put that in like with metabolic syndrome, there's several clinical studies in the metabolic syndrome. In fact, we're just finishing one article in an animal study with a high-fat diet-induced non-alcoholic fatty acid liver disease, and we
It should be a high-carb diet that does that.
Yeah, that's true too, right?
Yeah. That's my experience. Most of the time, the high-carb cut, not the fat, unless it's really bad fat.
Well, that's something we can investigate later also. But this is just a model that's been very commonly
omega-6,
used, right?
Probably it's industrially processed vegetable oils.
Sure. Well, what we found, though, the results are significant. There's several studies out there. Hydrogen was very effective at preventing the damage done to the liver. And in some of the metabolic syndrome studies, those with impaired glucose tolerance, a few of those patients, their glucose levels were brought back to the normal range. The various markers of there's so much we could go into about the diabetes. Hydrogen, in some of the animal studies, hydrogen may actually induce GLUT4 translocation by by a similar mechanism of insulin, potentiate insulin's secretion. We need more studies to show to investigate this, but some of these preliminary data is really showing it's great for these diabetics.
Well, what about cancer?
So cancer,
which is a big one. I mean, this is a useful modality as an adjunct. Certainly not the primary treatment.
Sure.
But as an adjunctive treatment in approaching cancer.
Yeah, it's I don't know, to be honest.
No one's looked at it?
Oh no, people have looked at it.
Okay.
And I'm just cautious. Cancer is difficult.
Yeah.
Cancer is not just, they have a genetic mutation.
No, it's not a genetic.
Right? Okay.
The genetic mutation is secondary to the oxidative damage.
Yeah, we have we have a metabolic disorder. We have genetic disorders. We have so many things, right? And so hydrogen helps induce cell survival, helps induce proliferation. So in some rationale, we could say, well, maybe hydrogen is not so good for cancer because maybe it's going to protect the cancer. And we have some evidence for that. But then there's also some good evidence to suggest that maybe hydrogen is very good to combat cancer. In fact, one of the first studies on hydrogen therapy was done in 1975 by Texas A&M and Baylor University, published in the Journal of Science. and they found that they transplanted melanoma tumors in mice and did a hyperbaric hydrogen chamber, okay? And they found that the hydrogen therapy in this condition was very effective at regressing the melanoma tumors.
Interesting.
I mean, it was very impressive. It probably didn't continue on with the research because it's not really practical to do such a high atmospheric pressure of hyperbaric hydrogen therapy. But then in 2007, when we showed that we could use feasible physiological levels of hydrogen, that's really what spawned the generation of hydrogen research. Then there's other studies on, so just at this symposium that I spoke at, there were probably 3 or 4 other researchers who talked about their research on cancer specifically, and showing that it had a very good effect at suppressing cancer growth. And we need more. We need more research. And one of the clinical studies was done with a radiotherapy on, I think, liver tumors, and they found that hydrogen was at least effective at improving the quality of life of the patients and mitigating the toxic side effects of the drugs. So animal studies are showing decreasing the chemotherapy, the side effects of the drugs and chemotherapy, but without altering any of the anti-tumor effects. And so I think what you said may be key, maybe not as the primary treatment.
Can't be the primary,
right?
There's no way.
But as a secondary or an
Adjunctive,
adjunct, you know, I think
it would be intriguing to see someone do a study where they're integrating hyperbaric oxygen with hyperbaric hydrogen.
Actually, that's kind of being done right now.
Because it makes a lot of sense.
It's a very good idea. Anytime you want to combine an oxidative type therapy, you want to use hydrogen, because you always have damage from an oxidative therapy. The damages, the pros outweigh the cons.
Yeah.
But hydrogen can help mitigate.
Yeah, in fact, I do that almost every day when I'm home. I do an ozone sauna, and before I go into the sauna, I take my hydrogen.
Okay.
Because I want to mitigate the side effects from the ozone.
Sure.
And get the benefits still.
Yeah. So, just to clarify, with cancer, we don't know, but as more of the data is coming out, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable that maybe, especially when there's no other hope in sight, it's probably not a bad idea.
All right, so I'm sure we've stimulated lots of people's interest in this, and they might be running out to their computer and searching Google as how they're going to get this. So I think it's pretty wise now to go into how you can access available hydrogen therapy, because there's a lot of different ways, and you're certainly an expert on that.
Well, yeah, so I'll talk in general sense about some of the methods and mechanisms. We don't sell or represent any hydrogen products, so you can go to our website and learn more, but
you're not going to buy anything.
Yeah, and you won't find any hydrogen products. We don't endorse or recommend anything. But there are many ways to administer hydrogen, and that's what I love about it. We talked about the inhalation of hydrogen gas. There are inhalation machines that you can buy. People make inhalation machines. One of the potential concerns, again, I haven't looked into this specifically, because it's not what I do, but when you do electrolysis of water, for example, you do produce hydrogen gas, and just by inhaling the gas produced at the cathode, that's hydrogen gas. But if those electrodes are not pure, the water you're using, it has, say, chloride, then you can get chlorine produced out of that, and then you could be inhaling that. So you just have to be somewhat cognizant.
Pay attention to the details.
Yeah, to those details. You don't want to be inhaling something that's actually could be toxic for you. So inhalation is one method. You also have a hydrogen-rich bathing. Actually, as a quick digression, but there is some interesting. The traditions we hear, right, from the fountains of youth and the Ponce de Leon and all these different things. Some of these healing waters around the world people have actually gone back to those waters, and they've actually shown that they contain small amounts of hydrogen gas in them. And so perhaps those waters did have some benefits.
I think they like sulfur too. It's like hydrogen sulfide.
Sure, hydrogen sulfide is good for you, and they could just be lacking some constituents like iodine or something. But it is interesting. Just some of these connections with hydrogen gas could be in there. But bathing in hydrogen water is a great way to do it. And then of course there's simply drinking hydrogen-rich water. And there's a number of ways to do that. Whether it's just a tank of hydrogen gas and you bubble it into the water and dissolve it under pressure, and then And then the storing hydrogen in like ready-to-drink cans, for example, or other pouches. Well, this will work, but you can't have hydrogen water stored in, say, plastic containers, because hydrogen is the smallest molecule. It'll dissipate right out of the container.
Yeah, and just to reemphasize what you said earlier, one of the reasons why it's so therapeutically beneficial, because it permeates every membrane in your body. There is not a space that it cannot get into. Whether it's your cell membrane, the blood-brain barrier, the mitochondrial membrane, it goes there.
Yes.
Just nothing stops it.
Yeah, it can easily permeate everything. And so if you see, hydrogen water and it's in plastic bottles on the shelf or something,
it's not real.
Right.
That hydrogen is long gone.
Right, if there was anything in there.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a clarification. Some people, when they hear, what do you mean add hydrogen to water? Isn't water already H2O?
Yeah, good point. Expand on that.
Right, well, okay, remember, water, the structure of water looks like Mickey Mouse, right? You have the oxygen and then the two hydrogens, and they're attached to the oxygen. They're attached to the oxygen. And like glucose, or sugar, right? It's C6H12O6. There's 6 carbons and there's 12 hydrogens. Those hydrogens are all bound to the carbon or to the oxygen. So completely different molecules, sugar and water, right? But they all have hydrogen. Most compounds have hydrogen in them. Hydrogen gas, like we mentioned earlier, was just 2 hydrogen atoms that are bound together. And that's hydrogen gas. And you can take this gas and bubble it, dissolve it into water. It doesn't attach to the water molecules. It doesn't make H4O or H3O or any other enigmatic.
It doesn't make structured water.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't.
Don't want to get any confusion.
Yeah, we don't want to. Yeah, or we don't want to get into any of this other realm, if you will. It's just hydrogen gas dissolved in water. You can take CO2 gas, oxygen gas, and dissolve that into water. It's
called, like sparkling water.
Yeah, I mean, okay, why if water already has oxygen gas?
Yeah.
So can't you? No, let's say water already has oxygen. So can't you just breathe water? Of course not, because the oxygen is tied up with the other bonds, right? Same thing with the hydrogen. So it's the hydrogen gas. So you can take the gas, dissolve it into water, and then you can drink it.
Or bathe in it.
Or bathe in it, or do an intravenous hydrogen-rich saline injection. Or there's a hyperbaric hydrogen therapy, which actually, when I was in Japan earlier this year, and there is a hyperbaric hydrogen chamber that has been developed.
Oh, nice.
And so if you can go in there and do a little session, I'm not sure on how it compares therapeutic-wise, but there's so many ways.
Because it is flammable.
Well, it's only flammable above a 4.6% concentration.
Oh, okay.
And so doing
but hyperbaric, so you can have hyperbaric at less of a...
At less, exactly.
Okay.
So if you look at the molar ratio, right, so it still may be okay. So it's interesting.
When we think of flammable, we think of the Hindenburg, which is hydrogen.
Yes, exactly. And one thing I'll say, you can measure the concentration of hydrogen gas, and you can look to see if it's really there. And you don't want to use, for example, there's ORP meters, oxidation reduction potential meters. Those are meaningless when it comes to hydrogen water. Of course, if you measure the ORP of a hydrogen water, you will get a negative number, because hydrogen is a reducing agent according to the Nernst equation. It's a redox balance, it's a ratio. But it's not going to measure hydrogen gas. It's very sensitive to pH in that case, because it's a redox couple. And the hydrogen gas is difficult to measure, though. Typically you have to use like gas chromatography or a specific hydrogen electrode with a standard calibration curve, because hydrogen is not an ion. It's not like oxygen is paramagnetic, so you could have a sensor for that, but hydrogen is not. It's diamagnetic. So many properties make hydrogen difficult to measure. But there is the redox titration reagent, H2 blue.
You can get.
Which you can get, yeah. H2sciencesInc.com, yeah, or other websites.
Sure.
There's so many places that sell. Even in
Amazon.
they sell it in Japan. It's in Korea. There's other companies that have their own product. I'm just saying it's something very easy, and you can measure the concentration of hydrogen, and you can see for yourself.
Maybe just go over in a minute or so what the process is like to actually do it by titration, to find out what the concentration.
Sure, and there's lots of explanations out there, but briefly, you fill up the water, a little beaker of water, say 6 milliliters of water, of your hydrogen water. Now, if there's no hydrogen gas in there, and you take the reagent, which has methylene blue and a chloroplatinum to act as a catalyst, and you add that in there, if there's no hydrogen in the water, it'll just go blue and stay blue. If there is hydrogen gas in there, and you add the drop in there, it'll turn it from blue to clear. It'll go clear. And then you add another drop. And you keep on adding them stepwise until the solution stays blue, it turns blue and stays blue. And that's called the titration endpoint. And you just count how many drops did it take to get there. And each drop was equivalent to about 1 milligram per liter. So if you added 10 drops, you have 1 milligram per liter, and so on.
And maybe you can discuss therapeutic ranges or targets with some of these things, because you've discussed the different routes of administration, but I think it's going to be important to figure out what the dose is.
Yeah, and I don't know. Okay, we don't know what the minimal effective concentration is. Yeah, what the MED is, and there's so many things to consider, because especially when we're talking about a gaseous signal modulator, that we're talking about intermittent exposure, right? Then we need to have not only an MED, but we need to talk about time scale, a time factor, right?
Right.
And its half-life. And so all I can tell you is what we have shown to be effective or therapeutic in the clinical studies. And so if we look at hydrogen water, the clinical studies have ranged from anywhere from you receiving between 0.5 milligrams to 1.5 milligrams and higher, even 5 milligrams of hydrogen per day. And these ranges appear to be therapeutic. If you get less, maybe for some diseases, for some people, for some conditions, in some circumstances, for maybe a chronic use, maybe it's still effective. But in some cases, you may need a higher concentration. And again, we need more research, but it appears, at least in some of these studies, that a higher concentration or a higher dose is more likely to be effective.
Especially if it's intermittent.
Yeah, it should be intermittent. I think that's the research is becoming more clear on that. But so IHSA, International Hydrogen Standards Association, that is the current recommendation when it comes to hydrogen products, is you should get 0.5 milligrams of hydrogen. You need to be able to get 0.5 milligrams of hydrogen by consuming no more than 1 liter.
Okay, so it has to be, I was going to ask you the volume.
Right, okay. And the reason why is because, you could take, okay, well, I'll just drink 4 liters of this, 0.2 milligrams or something. Well, then maybe if you did that, then that's a very small amount taken throughout the entire day. So the cellular concentration would never go above, say, 4 or 5 micromolar. Well, we need to get higher, maybe 8 to 20 micromolar in order to produce a therapeutic effect. And so this is why we're saying, okay, we'll limit it to 1 liter. There's so much discussion going on here, and it's very exciting to be a part of, but we need more clinical research.
Sure.
And this is actually, I want to talk about the dose in general, because when we talk about, okay, 0.5 milligrams or 2 milligrams of hydrogen, the saturation is
like a lot.
1.6 milligrams per liter. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot, but actually it's significant. And if you have to remember, hydrogen is the lightest molecule in the universe. Its molar mass is 2 grams per mole versus, say, vitamin C is 176 grams per mole. So it's a lot lighter. And so when you compare at a molecule to molecule or mole to mole, it's a lot. And to do a quick comparison, a saturated liter of water with 1.6 milligrams per liter actually contains more molecules of hydrogen than there are molecules of vitamin C in a 100 milligram dose. So there actually is significant. And if we look at other biomolecules, some molecules operate effectively at a nanomolar range. But when we take hydrogen, we're still at a micromolar range. So it's enough. But most importantly, we do see the therapeutic effect in the animal, cell, and clinical human studies.
And what do the studies suggest with respect to the half-life and the timing of the dose and the frequency?
Okay, sure. So in terms of half-life, once you, for example, if you were to drink hydrogen-rich water, depending on the dose that you take in, you're going to reach a peak blood level and breath exhalation, because hydrogen, when you consume it, it goes into the stomach and absorbs into the blood, and then it gets pumped to the heart and to the lungs, and you exhale a lot of the hydrogen gas out. And you see that peak in anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes. And then that peak goes back to baseline, because you have base levels of hydrogen. It goes back to baseline in about an hour or so. So that's kind of the half-life of hydrogen. And that's also where we know hydrogen is much more, in terms of it's more of a signal modulator, right? Because you can drink the hydrogen water and it's gone. It's out of the system within an hour, but yet it has residual therapeutic protective effects that last for hours, days, and even weeks. One of the studies in rheumatoid arthritis, a double-blinded, randomized study, is small, but they found that drinking hydrogen water is very effective for the disease. And now they're doing a very large study of 170-something patients that they're getting ready to do. But it was very effective. And in this study, they found that hydrogen, and actually with those with early onset rheumatoid arthritis, they had a remission of the disease.
That's
and
interesting.
and they during the washout period, they saw, so no one was taking hydrogen during this time. When they continued to monitor, they actually continued to see improvements in the disease for an additional 4 weeks.
That is odd, because just from what you shared about the mechanism, it doesn't seem like that would do that, because it seems to be targeting oxidative stress and inflammation, whereas in that scenario, you're actually targeting the actual mechanism of the cause, the foundational cause.
Because you're targeting gene expression. So by taking hydrogen within 3 days, we see increases in PGC1 alpha, for example. PGC1 alpha is mitochondrial biogenesis. That's a huge, the huge area.
That's what exercise
but we
works
see decreases in like NFAT, for example, or there's so many different transcription factors hydrogen operates on. So if we start to alter the gene expression, then some of these changes as a signal modulator can last for quite some time. So we get those residual effects. And this is what I'm very excited to see in the clinical studies.
And I'm happy to hear that, but I just don't want to give people a misimpression this is a magic bullet. So this isn't, just as in cancer, it's an adjunctive factor. It's to be done synergistically with other things that we know are beneficial to produce health and address disease.
I think that's critical, because hydrogen it's not, in my opinion, for example, you can't say hydrogen is a powerful antioxidant.
No, you can't.
The reason why hydrogen is so good is because it's a weak antioxidant. It's a humble molecule. Okay, it's very mild, and it's able to go in and slowly do things. And when you talk about doing a lot of things, you make these small and simple things are great things brought to pass, right?
Yeah.
And that's how hydrogen works.
So you've provided a load of information to intrigue and excite people about this really highly beneficial adjunct to their health. So I'm wondering if you could provide some recommendation or words of caution, perhaps, with respect to anyone out there who's really motivated and wants to get this and starts hopping on Amazon looking for hydrogen. So what would you advise?
Well, first off, the research is still in its infancy. There's so much more we have to do. We don't have hundreds of years of clinical studies that are just long-term. We have preliminary data. We have some pretty neat human studies. We need more. So we're not saying this is a cure-all, this is the end. We need more studies. We still have not proven the actual mechanisms. This being worked on. I happen to know some confidential information. Very excited about it, but these are not published. We don't have this data yet. We haven't proven exactly how it works, which is okay. There's lots of pharmaceuticals that we know have this effect, but we don't know how they work.
They did not know how aspirin worked.
Exactly.
We do now, but we didn't when I was in school.
Exactly. So it's okay, but we still don't know many things about hydrogen. We still need a lot more research. And the second, so that's one thing I caution is don't be thinking, like you said, this is some miracle thing that's going to cure everything, and we don't know. We need more research. It's just very exciting. We're on the cutting edge right now. And the second thing is, there is a lot of scams. It's a big market, and so there's a lot of companies trying to come in and, I'm going to make hydrogen water. There's companies who are just selling normal water, calling it hydrogen water, because they think water is already H2O. So they just change the name. That's not hydrogen. So don't just because a company claims hydrogen or because a company claims a certain concentration, it may not be true.
But this is easy to check because you can buy this test.
You can buy the test reagent.
What is it again? H2 blue?
H2 blue, yeah. And then there's another one out of Japan. They make it in Korea.
Yeah, so you can test it yourself.
Yeah,
just
you can
to confirm
test it yourself.
You should if it's.
Yeah, there's once you get to know a certain company, you're able to maybe evaluate, But so that's my second concern is or caution, right? Is just don't jump at the first thing that says hydrogen, the next big thing,
Sure.
right? And then lastly, I just want to reiterate again, that's nothing to do with alkaline water.
Yeah, I was going to thank you. I almost forgot to mention that because, but that was some of the excitement. Alkaline water, essentially, and I've written articles on this, does not work.
Yeah.
It does not work. It's nothing to do with the pH. If it works, it's due to hydrogen.
Well,
so why don't you expand on that?
This is, it is just such an interesting history. So alkaline ionized water. So the Japanese government's very strict.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're stricter than the FDA. In my opinion, FDA is underfunded, and that's why we have a lot of problems.
It's also corrupted.
Exactly, that's why it's so corrupted.
Yeah.
Well, not saying that's why. There's so many issues. But the Japanese government's also very strict, and in order they had this idea of applying alkaline ionized water for agriculture and later for human use. They had to get the Japanese government approval in order to even start doing that. They did that. I mean, similarly, we have the FDA approval for dental floss, for example. Anything that's going to be used on the human body has to be a medical device. Mm-hmm. So they got that approval, but no medical doctors, no scientists thought anything of it. It doesn't make any sense that alkaline water could do any of these benefits, because even if you subscribe to the idea that we need to alkalize our bodies, you can't do it.
Probably some benefit to.
Yeah, which we're not even discussing that, right? But even if you subscribe to that, you can't do it with alkaline water. Because alkaline water is not a buffer.
Yeah, that's a key point. So explain that, expand on that.
So a buffer is a substance that's able to prevent changes in pH. Okay, and to put it in perspective, if we look at baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, which is our body's natural buffering system, 1 teaspoon of baking soda can neutralize the same amount of acid as over 700 liters of alkaline water at a pH of 10. Mm-hmm. So there's
which is a pretty high pH.
Yeah, it is. And baking soda.
Most people aren't going to drink a pH of 10.
And once it goes above pH 10, according to some of the Japanese studies, it's not a good idea anyways. But and baking soda is a pH of 8.1. Yeah. So it's not a buffer.
Right.
So what happened in Japan is they had nobody really accepted this idea, but it started growing in the marketplace, and it started getting a lot of press, especially in the 80s. Mm-hmm. It started getting a lot of press. And because people were receiving these anecdotal benefits, like, what, I'm getting this and this. So they started doing this research in the 90s, and also in Korea in the 90s started doing research, and they found this water, this alkaline ionized water, electrolyzed reduced water, appeared to have some sort of antioxidant and anti-diabetic and anti-cancer effects. And like, how is this possible? The researchers didn't know. Read the studies. Yeah. They really didn't know. They were just saying, this is what we're finding in the research. Right. But then, as of course, as the market grew, well, they have to explain something. And so now there was this whole idea of this microclustering idea, or this free electrons in the water, or the negative ORP, or this alkaline benefit alone, or so many different ideas that were propagated through marketing, but were never scientific.
Never validated.
Never validated. The scientists themselves never said that. Continued to do some research, and then what happened was that article in Nature Medicine was published in 2007. Yeah. So now some of these other researchers saw that publication, and they thought, hey, when you do electrolysis of water, by definition, you produce hydrogen gas. What if hydrogen gas is responsible as a therapeutic agent? Before that, everyone thought hydrogen gas was just a byproduct. Reads the article. This is so interesting. And they're like, oh, and it produced hydrogen gas. Or many of them won't even mention hydrogen gas, right?
Because it was insignificant.
Because hydrogen's always been considered to be essentially biologically inert, would have no therapeutic effect. And that's why there was the idea of active hydrogen, which is a reactive atomic hydrogen radical. And that was the first kind of idea that of merging maybe a hydrogen has an effect was in the active atomic hydrogen radical form, which would be totally impossible. It's completely unstable in that form. But anyways, some of these other researchers, they're like, okay, well, that's a simple study to do. So we have Dr. Lee from Korea. He is the pioneer researcher in alkaline ionized water from the 1990s. He's one of the first persons to show these effects. He's also one of our advisors. Mm-hmm. You can look him up on our website. You'll see where he started, MD, PhD, and all this. And he started looking at this. Well, he did the research, and he found, hey, when I take alkaline ionized water and I remove the hydrogen gas from the water, even though the pH is the same, even though all these things,
ORP and everything,
the benefits are eliminated. Mm-hmm. The benefits were eliminated when you remove the hydrogen gas. The hydrogen gas is responsible for the negative ORP. If you remove all the hydrogen gas, the ORP does go back up positive. Okay. But you only need like 0.8 like 0.5 milligrams per liter to get a negative ORP. So you can have a negative ORP, say negative 200, probably won't be therapeutic. And the reason why? There's no hydrogen gas in there. Well, not enough. It was very low, very low level. But anyway, this was shown, he showed it many times, many studies. In fact, our study on non-alcoholic fatty acid liver disease that I talked about, that was originally done by the group in Israel using alkaline ionized water. And they did just like all the studies, they did electrolysis for a couple of hours, they had very high pH, very high negative ORP, all these things. They did the study, very disappointed because no effect. I then explained to them the hydrogen gas, they did the exact same study, and now we're collaborating on this a couple years ago, we're collaborating on this for a while now, and now all of a sudden, they see the effects of hydrogen gas. And we did two. We did a low concentration of hydrogen and a high concentration of hydrogen. The low concentration of hydrogen, still no effect. The higher concentration of hydrogen was very therapeutic.
And what was the high concentration?
I think we did 0.3 milligram per liter for the low, and then 0.7 or 0.8 milligram for the high.
Still not very high.
It's still not very high,
yeah.
Right? Of course, animals drink more water. But still, this again shows. Well then, the last one in Japan, Dr. Mami Noda from Kyushu University, she was also one of the first researchers on alkaline ionized water. She was the one. She also researched at Rockefeller University. She's a very good pharmacologist researcher, and she had friends come to her who were drinking alkaline ionized water and say, "Hey, Dr. Noda, I'm getting better. How is this possible?" And she, being a scientist, I don't know. First, I don't know if this is even true. This is very strange. It doesn't make any sense scientifically, but she tried it. And so she, in her study, she took animals and she induced Parkinson's disease, gave them hydrogen water, and she showed that hydrogen water prevented the development of Parkinson's disease. And so she also was curious, how is this possible? Saw the publication in Nature Medicine, and then did the exact same thing, did the exact same studies, and then removed the hydrogen gas from the water, as well as simply bubbled hydrogen gas into water, and it was very clear that it was only the hydrogen gas responsible for mediating the benefits. And this Parkinson's disease study, and a different one from Nagoya University, I need to tell you how Dr. Kinji, also our advisor, but that's who I worked with when I was in Japan, how he got interested in hydrogen.
Sure.
It was also because of Parkinson's disease. Okay, and he heard a lot of these things, but see, Nagoya is the 5th most prestigious university in Japan. He's a very respected researcher. So he's not just going to dabble into something. So he's heard about this, and he's like, I'll try it. So in his lab, he also developed a model to induce Parkinson's disease, and he saw that the drinking hydrogen-rich water prevented the development of Parkinson's disease. And in his words, and you can read it, it's on the website, his quote, when he saw in his own lab with his own eyes that hydrogen had that effect, that changed his research career and got him interested into the hydrogen biology and specifically to elucidate the molecular mechanisms behind how hydrogen is having these effects. And maybe post video we can put up something and I'll show you what they saw, and you'll see the rats, the differences between drinking hydrogen water and drinking control water.
We can easily do that, sure.
But anyway, we need a lot more research, but it's very exciting what we're seeing, because we're actually seeing that the studies from the animal studies are being transmitted to the human studies. We're actually seeing that there's an effect in humans as well, not just in animals.
Absolutely. Well, this is great. This is so exciting. It really is. And but I just to finish off the alkalizer water, because most of the alkalizers out there, they produce hydrogen gas.
By definition,
But they have to. But here's the problem, that most of them also produce scale.
Yeah.
And once that's essentially scaled, these catalyzers, or what is the actual device that does it?
Well, you have the electrodes, right?
Once the electrodes become scaled,
mineral depositions,
then they don't work, and you're not only not getting a low pH or a high pH, but you're also not getting hydrogen gas.
Well, it's interesting because
certainly reduced.
Yeah, because the mineral buildup, it appears, and we didn't know this until the H2 Blue was available, so we could actually measure, right? And we see that all of a sudden after a few weeks of use, first off, if you have a low TDS water, you won't even, you may be able to produce a high pH, but you won't have dissolved hydrogen gas.
Sure.
In this process, you need some minerals to act as some nucleation sites to dissolve the hydrogen. And then if you do live in a place that has the higher TDS, then after a few weeks of use, then you can get the mineral deposits on the electrodes, and it prevents the gas from dissolving in the water. Okay, and this is why, look, check the companies, all of them will make a big deal about cleaning the machines, cleaning the electrodes, whether running acidic water or doing a reversing polarity or doing everything. And it's because
And most people don't do that.
it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
It's a lot
like
of work.
hours of work.
It accumulates.
Yeah.
So yeah, that mineral buildup prevents the gas from dissolving because these water ionizers, they were all developed for an alkaline pH, not hydrogen gas. In fact, when I was in Japan a few years ago, not only did they not know, you think about it. If you're a manufacturer and you realize you're producing hydrogen gas, this gas could be toxic. We don't know. So one of the ideas was actually to produce a machine that had the lowest concentration of hydrogen gas, but yet is still a high pH, because they wanted to be safe, right?
Yeah.
But things are like, you go to Japan, like Nihon Shrimp, that's one of the Japanese companies. They own the largest market share by 70%, and followed by Panasonic for this area. All of them are changing to hydrogen water. They have their specific machines. They're alkaline water ionizers. They make it, okay, pH will not go above, say, 9.5. They had a whole different chamber so they can keep the pH low, increase the hydrogen dissolved concentration. So everything in Asia is going away from the alkaline water ionizers and finally to the hydrogen gas.
And there's probably still benefit there, but what still has yet to be resolved, because the research hasn't been done, is that you're still drinking this all day, so you're approaching a continuous infusion, which violates the original principle of making it cyclical or pulsing it. So drinking it, although it might be effective, maybe you might not want to drink it all day long, or have a higher dose.
I like you very first said it, we don't know. We need more research, because if you are drinking it all day long, well, that's still in some sense an intermittent, but maybe it is too close to continuous. Maybe it's better to take just one high dose in the morning and one at night, or, we don't know. But what we do know, it's providing a therapeutic effect. You're not going to go wrong.
No, you're not going to hurt yourself.
There could be a better way,
Yeah.
But we need more research to see, right?
So I've known you for a few years now, been very excited about it, and continue to explore it, and really excited to hopefully, basically scrub through the details and provide something that would be helpful at some time in the future.
Well, I'm sure that your viewers would appreciate that. There's a lot of scam products out there, but the research is very promising, and like I say, it's very, very rare that you can come across a molecule that is so safe, but yet has such strong therapeutic potential, right? And the review, years ago, 2013, by Loma Linda University, their review article then showed that hydrogen had therapeutic effects for the top 8 of the 10 disease-causing fatalities listed by the CDC, the Centers of Disease Control. So when you look at something like that, yes, hydrogen merits more research, more investigation, more clinical studies, and that's why I'm so passionate about this, and I'm very excited to see where things end up with the hydrogen research.
That's right. So why don't you share your website?
Sure,
MolekularHydrogenFoundation.org, I believe.
That's right.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, MolekularHydrogenFoundation.org, also MolekularHydrogenInstitute.org. And again, we are a science-based nonprofit. We're working to advance the research, the education, and the awareness of hydrogen as a medical gas. So you're not going to find products and things on our site, but you will find a lot of information, and we do our best to provide what's going on in the hydrogen area.
Well, great. Any other concluding comments?
Yeah, I hope that you'll review this video and review the information on hydrogen, and although we have a responsibility as maybe researchers to understand the molecular mechanisms and targets of hydrogen and do clinical studies, because we have a molecule so significant like this and so safe, perhaps it's also your responsibility to share it. to spread the awareness to others, let other people know about it. There are some people who don't have access to medical care that this could really benefit, and there are also those who have access to too much medical care, where hydrogen could help mitigate the toxic effects of such.
Most of the United States.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been awesome. I'm so glad you were able to trek your way to Chicago in the frigid cold, and we're able to provide some really solid information for our viewers.
I appreciate it.